Hello, welcome to another episode of Staying Power, a show that is all about building a better life. And it always begins with Ashley laughing on the feed. But this is a show about building a better life. And that means a lot of different things, a lot of different ways. Every week we come together to talk about one of those things in some way, shape, or form and hope that it resonates with you. And by we, I mean myself, JDK Wyneken, and my co-host, my colleague, my co-creator, my friend, the incomparable Ashley Knebel.
Oh,
Hi, Ashley.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, how's it going?
That's good.
How are you enjoying the new camera that is in the studio here?
We'll see. I'm getting really distracted.
And distracted by it. What she's talking about, of course, is our live stream. You can now watch the live stream of every episode of Staying Power from this point on our YouTube channel. And if you don't know where that is yet, don't worry. You can get it in the show notes, both wherever you get your podcasts, as well as at our radio home, 1150 AM KKNW. You can get it there at their website. And we would love to have you watch if you are available to do that. The cool thing about that is not only can you see the dynamic in here and maybe get a better idea of what Ashley's laughing at when she's laughing, but also you can send in comments and we might actually catch some during the show that we could address. So be looking for that wherever you are. So thank you so much for joining us wherever you are, whether you're watching or whether you're listening. We certainly do appreciate it. It has been a busy few weeks around here, Ashley, hasn't it?
It certainly has.
Yeah, we've got new shows launching under the Staying Power Network. We are working on our own show. We've added the YouTube channel. We're going to be putting stuff up there in the next few days, and we have some social media stuff that is on the way. So it's exciting.
It is. Oh gosh, it's so many good things all at once, and I'm forever thankful that they all fell on us at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Even though sometimes it feels like you're kind of kind of digging out from these things,
juggling,
from these everything every once in a while. So we'll talk a little bit about the new show that launched under our banner towards the end of the show. But today, let's jump into a topic that kind of came across
near and dear to your heart.
Near and dear to my heart. I'm not sure. Well, certainly near.
Near, not dear.
Dear is not the word I would choose at the moment, but it is in the big scheme of things. And one of the things, if you're a new listener to the show, one of the things that Ashley and I like to do is, while we do prep for the show, we tend to take subjects on, I guess it's fair to say, Ashley, a week-to-week basis, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we want it to be in real time and have it be a real conversation, not necessarily about things that we're already experts in, but things that we are going through or things we see other people going through.
Yeah, that's how we prep, is we just live and then and then it happens.
And then we talk about it.
And then we talk about it.
And it seems to work because people seem to enjoy it.
People keep coming back.
They do come back. So this week, the topic for this week is a challenging one in the sense for me to talk about, not just because it's a challenging subject for me, but because I'm still working through this subject in real time in some specific situations right now. It's real fresh. Yeah, it's real fresh. And it's going to go in a few different directions, but and Ashley already knows what we're talking about here because Ashley's been part of this process. So let me ratchet back a little bit, Ashley, for the sake of kind of catching people up. Some stuff that you already know, but not too long ago, a friend of mine introduced me to the theories and practices of internal family systems therapy. It's a type of psychoanalytic therapy that is becoming more and more popular. It was created by a guy named Dr. Richard Schwartz, and he's written a book about it that's called No Bad Parts. And there is a link to that in the show notes, by the way, if you're interested in taking a look at that, as well as to his institute that focuses on this. And it's a form of psychotherapy in which it's predicated on the idea that rather than us being all of our feelings and all of the messaging we have internally is just one monolithic us, this monomind, that actually we are made up of multiple different minds and multiple different parts, not in a mental illness sort of way, multiple personalities way, but what he calls subpersonalities. And so sometimes when we feel super conflicted in the middle of something, right? We feel two different emotions, or we're telling ourselves two different sets of stories. That could be two separate parts of ourselves that are based in our past, that are based in usually built up in traumas in the past, or something that felt traumatic, that are continuing to have an outsized influence on our adult selves now. And we may or may not be aware to what degree that's happening. And the therapeutic part is acknowledging that part first of all, and then going through with the help of a therapist, but you can also learn to do some of this on your own, conversations with those parts to kind of learn from them, to show that they're valued. Chances are they're trying to protect you from something, and move on. And there's a lot of different component pieces that go into it, and they'll come up a little bit. But I was introduced to this, and it really resonated with me, about the week and a half or so ago, 2 weeks ago, that this came about. Because I'd done some of that work before, Ashley. We've talked about it. I've done therapy work where, reparenting the inner child and the maladaptive teen. I've also done Gestalt therapy where there's a series of chairs, and you take on different elements of your personality and have conversations with each other, and you sit in different chairs and talk to
You've done that?
version. Yeah, I have. Yeah. Some people call it voice therapy. That's how it's been called. But yeah, it's like you identify these versions of you. Like I had, you'll laugh at this, the professor that overtalks, right? I had the critic, I had the judge, I had the bullied child, right? And they all had kind of distinct elements, and they could have conversations. So I'd done some of this stuff before. It's been a while, but this sounded really intriguing to me. And I also have a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. He is doing IFS work, and it is really fundamentally helping him through he's going through some of the, easily the toughest time of his life right now. And it's really helping him. So this was something, when I put all those things together, I was like, yeah, this sounds interesting. And so I took a look at that. And to make a long story short, as I was digging through those things, Ashley's laughing. You can see it on the stream. It stirred up all these things. And so unsurprisingly, in retrospect, suddenly old feelings, some of those parts that perhaps are dominant, were suddenly much closer to the surface of my awareness than before. And this all came to bear at the end of last week. I had a really rough day on Friday. Really rough day, emotionally full. Some unexpected things happened that really kind of put me sideways. And so without me knowing it and really connecting to that, all these parts, several parts of me that go back to very young ages, 7, 13, even a little bit older, right, in my 20s, all kind of came together and put me sideways. And I did not know what was happening. And then it culminated with a friend of mine left me a voice message, who had called me, and it landed really poorly in that state of mind that I was in. And I sent back a response that was not helpful. Now, it wasn't angering. It wasn't dismissive. It wasn't anything like that. It was really full of misunderstanding, a great degree of self-pity about my situation, fear projecting onto her with, some things. And it just was gross. And I had this reaction, Ashley, now Ashley knows all of this in part because Ashley got a full recap of this at what time?
I think gave it at like 1:30 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah, following that.
Which, I mean, I didn't see it until like 5 in the morning because I was dead asleep. But I saw it. It was like reading the morning paper. It's like, wow, look at all these like updates and headlines.
Yeah, it was a long message.
It was a long message.
I kind of downloaded the whole thing on the backside of this. But when I sent this message, I realized within a few minutes of sending it, I felt like I was coming to my senses, and I went, wait a minute, that wasn't fair. That's overstated. That's overdramatic. That has nothing to do with her. Try to unsend it. Nope. Too late. It was gone. So I then quickly followed up behind it with like, okay, that was overly dramatic. But of course, then that felt just even more pathetic, right? I was just, oh, gotta be kidding. And I knew it wasn't going to land well. Long story short, the next morning, the response, not from Ashley, your response was really good. Oh, very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Help me get out of the panic of the moment and recognize it as part of a larger thing. Her response, however, was more difficult. It was something that she didn't appreciate. It was something that didn't land well for very understandable reasons. And it kicked off some stuff for her that we have wrestled with before in our friendship. So that hadn't happened in a while. And so suddenly all of that came crashing down. And from a parts perspective, when I took a look at that, I went, I know what parts are talking or were talking in this. Now, to fast forward just a touch so we can have the conversation more broadly. My friend reached out to me a day or two later. We kind of settled things a little bit. She reached out. We had a good conversation for a couple of hours the other night, worked through some stuff. It was a hard conversation. It was tough. And I shared some of this, but it was kind of more in a different spot. And some good things came out of it. So I was having a rough weekend until, right, working through that. Was beating myself up, and not feeling good about it and wondering what was wrong with me. So it felt so out of character. And then I felt really good after the conversation. Yesterday was the day after that. I kind of whipsawed the other way. Like, I felt good about how we showed up. I felt good about being in a difficult conversation. And I was almost euphoric about it. And she and I had another exchange, and she was not feeling euphoric. She was still dealing with the weight of it. And suddenly I'm coming in, as she called it, like a big tent revival. Like, how did you get here? And she was right. But then even before I saw that message this morning, that's how real time this is. Before I saw that message this morning, I was already off of that. I woke up this morning with kind of that emotional hangover, right, from just the whole process and that whipsaw, and it didn't help anything. So this is all in process still. This is unresolved. I think it'll be okay. She and I've worked through some stuff before. That said, it's kind of still flying around, right? And yeah. So, and I should add really quickly, I have had her full permission to talk about anything with she and I on this show for a long time. This is the first time I think I actually have talked about it all in full.
How does it feel to talk about that with all of our listeners?
With all listeners.
And our viewers.
Well, I will say there are a number of different parts. How about that? Okay. But let me start with the different feelings since you asked them directly. It feels honest, and I'm connected with how I'm feeling, so that feels good to be in alignment with that. There's some fear in there. It's difficult to talk about some of these vulnerable things. Hers is a very important relationship in my life, and I want to take care of that, right? But I think sometimes what I can do, I'm learning through my investigations lately, the last few weeks, is sometimes I overcare with the things that are really important to me. I rather than trusting them to be as strong as they've been built out to be, sometimes when in these modes, at least, I can certainly start thinking like it's going to fall apart if I don't keep my hands on it. Right. Sure. So there's that. I'm frustrated. I feel frustration because I don't want this situation to be like it is. I also feel some acceptance that this is the way it is. And I don't really know what's going to happen next. And that's uncertain, and that creates fear. And I also feel great gratitude that I've got people around me that know what's going on, that I've reached out to, and you being one of them. And that helps. So I feel connected and supported and believed in. I'm also feeling good that I can recognize that there's some things happening that I need to take care of, that I need to look at,
that
I need to. And I'm always appreciative of that. So anyway, so there's all that, Ashley. So with that in mind, what's rolling around with you?
Well, I mean, I know this situation with you, right? Because I've kind of been there through all the steps from the initial explosion or whatever you want to call it, and all the aftershocks that have come from it. But I mean, to be honest, from my perspective of being just your good friend and being able to be there to help support you in it, I'm thankful that I get to be there, help you through it. I'm more than happy to be a safe, comfortable space and container for you to feel like you can kind of not unload all the messiness of it, right? But you can just show up however you were feeling at the time and work through some of the stuff, right? Some of that was through our conversation. Some of that was from a very long text I got, which is okay.
The one I mentioned.
Yes, the one that you mentioned. And maybe some people would not be, like, okay with that, but to me, it was fine because I
Mhm.
knew that, you know, you might be going through something, and, it's not like I saw it and immediate was like, "I need to read this right now." Like, I understood that there was gonna be some depth to that message, and so
Mhm.
I waited until it was an appropriate time for me to, like, actually sit and read it without being interrupted and put
Mhm.
my full focus into this because I could tell there's gonna be some emotion from you in that, right? Like, this
Mhm.
this is a very heartfelt thing that you are dealing with in life's time, and
Oh, I
you're,
was so
somebody
upset with
that
myself. Yeah.
yeah, saying, we're close, and so I'm like, "This really matters to him," so I wanna give that the opportunity to portray everything that it was meant to do.
Mhm.
And then in reading that, I'm glad that what I responded back with helped, but sometimes people get so in the moment muck of it that it's really hard to see something
Mhm.
grander than it is. And as much as, we're working on like one puzzle piece of our life at a time, there is a grander picture
Sure.
always
Right.
that we're building. And I think my message was just trying to help you realize that like yes, this moment is necessary because you have to go through it to get to the next one, but
Mhm.
this is building a larger picture for you. And this one moment, it may describe something about the picture, but it's not going to define
Mhm.
everything about your grand picture of your
Mhm.
life. And, we'll sit and process and let things come and go as they do,
Mhm.
and you'll make it alive on the other side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and what I thought when you sent that to me was, "Wow, what a great coach moment you just gave me."
You're
It's one
welcome.
piece of yeah, so that was nice. Yeah, it was really nice. Okay, well, let's take a break. We have
Oh,
that set up.
already.
Yeah,
Wow.
we have that set up, and let's talk a little bit about it. I know some places, some questions I have for you
Okay.
on regards to that, and, so when come back here on Staying Power, we will continue this conversation about when our parts crash, I guess, or crash us. Come on back.
As a teacher, I should know the answers, but with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, answers don't come easy. Steroids made my gut feel better, but they brought symptoms and risks of their own. A friend told me about the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and they helped me find a specialist. We talked through the pros and cons and landed on a new treatment. I feel like the guy with answers again. Don't wait. Make sure you have the latest info and the best plan for you. Spill your guts. Learn more at spillyourguts.org.
Dialogue is one of humankind's oldest communication traditions, and it's increasingly important to inspire conversation invoking change for the future. In this spirit, New Urban Unlimited conveys stories which shape our complex world as we move forward on topics such as health, finance, arts, and community events through quality conversation with our contributors and guests. I'm Dr. James Gore, and I'm the host of New Urban Unlimited every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. on KKNW. For more information about the show, visit newurbanunlimited.com.
Find out the latest about your favorite shows on Alternative Talk 1150. Check out 1150kknw.com.
Welcome back to Staying Power. JD here with Ashley.
Hello.
And we today are talking about a mess of my own making. So, if you are watching this on the live stream, you've probably seen where my body language is and where Ashley's body language is. I'm I'm glad to be talking about it.
Yeah.
You're in a really accepting spot. I'm in a part that's decidedly uncomfortable on some level. I'm fidgeting around a little bit.
I'm like
Um,
laid back. I'm relaxed.
I know you're just like in full
I'm
mode.
here
It's
having a
great.
good time.
It's great. I know it's great. But what we're talking about is a situation that I'm going through with a friend of mine that really came from a place of I had a real rough day a few days ago, didn't handle it really well in some communication, and it revealed what internal family systems therapy might identify as battling parts inside of me based in younger years that are still influencing my understanding of myself and what can I do about them. And so that's led to the conversation about this. Now, Ashley, to kick off this portion of the show, I want to share with you my friend who introduced me to IFS stuff a few
Mhm.
weeks ago.
Mhm.
We were having a conversation about it because she was reading and was really interested in it. Like this is something, for her she was interested in. But I think I asked her, like, well, how do I come across to you? Do I come across as somebody who is, open, vulnerable? And she said something, I'm paraphrasing. She said, JD, I don't think I've met anybody who can be both simultaneously as vulnerable and also as invulnerable as you. Like, you can put up this sense that everything's good, that everything's all right, and yet you can be really vulnerable about specific things in specific times in specific ways. And that just caught me when she said that, because it's something I'd never thought about. It resonated as true and was a paradox that I know I don't like, right? And that told me something like, I need to take a look at this. And then, of course, now here we are. So my question to you is twofold. One, do you think you know do you understand what she's talking about? And two, how does this play for you? That vulnerability for you and what we're talking about with IFS stuff, does it resonate?
Okay. First question. Not to say I'm privileged, but for you, in the version of you that I've known for the last couple of years or so that we've known each other, I've always felt like I have really seen the real you, and that you have not shown something of yourself to me. Like, you've never had a bad day and masked it and said, "Oh, things are fine." Like, you've always been really honest.
Okay.
Half the time, it feels like I'm watching a theater production and the curtain has already risen and you didn't realize it. So I'm like
On the
seeing
reality of things, you mean?
like, yeah,
Okay,
everything.
that's good, I
So,
guess.
like, I feel like I've been seeing you this whole time.
But I haven't.
You didn't realize I was.
Okay.
But I mean that in a good way.
Okay.
Like, and maybe it's because I've created something that's so acceptance and non-judgmental that you never felt like you needed to hide something or, put up a facade or whatnot. I could see where people could see that though.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's something that you were doing or if it's our version of how we see you covers who you really are in moments. Because even in our mutual friends and circles, people see you as a very confident, knowledgeable, all these great things, which you are. But I feel like they always see you that way. So they can't imagine you not being that way. And even if you do have a bad day or something, like some of these conversations we're having right now might blow some people's minds because I don't think they ever thought that JD has stuff like this. And so they're like, he's human like us. Like, but that would be my comment about this is that to answer your second question, does any of this resonate with me? It does, because you are you and I am I, but we're still humans having an experience.
Right.
And your experience might look a little bit different than mine, but it's still an experience that at your age or my age, being you and me being me, it still can be the same thing. And there's certainly things I found it interesting, as you were saying, going through the therapy of the voices or
The parts.
I don't remember what you said, but like when you're sitting at different areas in the circle and you're representing a different portion of yourself and a different part of yourself, I find that really interesting because I feel like if people were willing to go to that extent to get to know themselves better, that they would probably have conversations with themselves that they didn't know were resonating inside them.
It would surprise them. Yes, I guarantee it. So just in general, neither one of us are IFS practitioners, right?
And I've never gone through it. So.
Yeah, and exactly. But if this idea of parts resonates with you, are there ones that you think about for you? Not that you need to name them necessarily. I mean, I can name a few of mine. I have a 13-year-old like part that is so wounded from some things that happened to him socially, right? That still I'm recognizing has, I talked about idealizing relationships, right? And I can see sometimes conflict in them as being a threat. And I use this language, again, revealed by a friend of mine, a lot of times where I talk about people staying or leaving. That's not an adult talking about people. That's a kid. That's a teenager worried about staying late, because the situation that I faced when I was 13 was somebody very abruptly leaving in my life that was really important to me. And it came as a complete and utter shock. And it was also humiliating. And I felt completely alone and unarmed, right, to defend myself and to help myself in it. And I mean emotionally unarmed. right, to
Mhm.
help myself. And that has had a cascading effect,
Mhm.
including in some ways in the situation that I'm going through right now with my friend. That's one of them. So that's just an example.
Sure.
Do you have any that pop up for you?
Um, when I think about it, I mean, I do know I have and I would just base this off of like a tendency that I noticed that of perfectionism. And I know a lot of people have this, but when I think about when I was a child, I remember even at very young single digit age, I so desperately wanted to be perfect
Mm,
because perfect was the most ideal. It was not problematic to anybody or anything. So I always wanted to do right and do my chores and eat healthy and be a perfect kid for my parents and the perfect sibling to my brother. And I'm not sure why I decided that that was like the ultimate goal when
mhm,
I was like 6 or 7.
mhm,
But I do know that that has now carried so far into when I'm like older now that if I want to impress or if I want to leave a good impression on something, I feel like I have to have it perfectly done,
mm,
and I will
or
stress.
else.
Yeah, otherwise I'm falling so far short.
What would the else have been when you were younger?
I don't know,
Okay,
to be honest. I
okay.
mean, I just thought
What
of
would the
this
else be
recently.
now?
It probably would not be as bad as I originally imagined it to be,
Right,
right? Because
right,
we create this illusion that, like,
uh-huh,
if you don't reach the very tippity top, then you're falling down to the bottom of the mountain.
right,
Probably not.
right. Those are those stories, right,
Mhm,
that we talk about.
mhm.
Okay, so perfectionism, for sure,
Yeah.
from a young age.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
In strange ways, I mean, I think I've even said on the show before, like, journaling, while I know it's helpful, it's difficult for me because if I write something out and I don't like my handwriting, I wanna, like, rip it out and rewrite it.
mm.
I don't because who has time for that? So I just don't journal. Uh,
But you have a journal.
but
We've
I do
talked
have
about
it, so
it.
I'm trying, like, I don't do it consistently. Like, I
Ah,
try to, I'm that this is like a I'm working through this, like,
yeah,
present day.
right.
But little things like that,
Mhm,
like, I want everything neat and tidy and clean. I want things, like, organized, and if
mhm,
it's not, I'm not, like, really, really bad, but
mhm.
there is a level of something in me that I can feel significantly calms down when everything is perfect and right.
Okay. What, and without necessarily naming it or anything like that, what are the negative side effects of that?
I probably stress some people out significantly.
Mm,
I'm sure I stress myself out, put unnecessary pressures on myself. And it's a work in progress. Like I
mhm,
am learning to accept things as is, and sometimes as is good enough.
mhm.
And there can be something really great about being imperfect.
What can be great about being imperfect?
Well, there's a lot less stress.
There is that.
But when you're just really authentic and it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna accept that this may not be perfect, but this is my best. And if I'm just giving my best effort in
Mhm,
something and it doesn't reach the total mark, is that my own expectation? Was that an expectation of somebody else placed on me? But if I can reconcile with myself, like, I really gave it my all and
mm,
it felt really good to give my all.
mhm,
Sometimes I just have a hard conversation with myself of like, it's not perfect. And so what?
mhm.
Is your day over because it wasn't perfect? No. There's plenty of times I come on here and I don't feel like I did a perfect job on the air. But I go home and I'm like, "You know what? I still had fun. I had a great time. I think we talked about some really good, important things. I'm gonna call it a win."
Mhm.
So,
Because it is, and of course, there's no expectation for you to be perfect on this show
mhm,
in particular, because I certainly am not. So, yeah, and I think for me, where perfectionism comes in and kind of coming back, I can relate. I have similar things, like, and when I can accept an imperfection of something, it does help me let go of taking responsibility, perhaps for things that I'm not responsible for.
mm,
And in the context of relationships of any kind, seeing that in that regard, maybe that part, and recognizing that it doesn't need that childlike perfectionism doesn't need to determine my adult actions. That allows me to kind of let that anxiety go a little bit more, right?
mhm,
And take care of what I can actually take care of. And the challenge for me in really important relationships, I think sometimes, is that that perfectionism comes up And before I know it, I'm managing something,
Mm.
right? Trying to manage myself, trying to manage that person. And it's really dispiriting when I am caught in the awareness that I know that's happening,
Hmm.
right? And like, oh man, I'm not in the spot that I want to be in, and I can't track myself down, right? Or can't calm myself down and get back to that grounded place. That part can be challenging. Uh, so I can relate to what you're saying. And I'll be very curious to know like where all that came from for you. I wonder, does like a lot of the stuff that you do in terms of the strength trainings that you do,
Mhm.
is that kind of empowering thing? Because if to feel like you have to be perfect can feel really, I would think, weakening as a kid. Like you have no margin for error, right?
Yeah.
And so, learning how to protect yourself, defend yourself, strength. I can see an advantage of that. Or
Sure.
am I making up a connection that's not there?
I mean, I didn't start power training and all the strength training and stuff like that until I was, like, in my 20s.
Mhm.
But I feel like there is a connection there to an extent.
Mhm.
I mean, as a kid, I felt like being a child was my own hiccup because I'm like, I wanna be an adult. I hated being a kid.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Your
I'm
own
like
hiccup.
yeah, because 'cause I'm like, there's so many things you can't do as a child. There's so many things you don't
Mhm.
know yet, and I knew that I didn't know them.
Mhm.
And, a lot of times I would wanna sit with the adults. I would wanna do the adult things because I found that more fascinating than kid things. And of
Mhm.
course, sometimes I was invited, but other times they're like, "No, you're not old enough," and I'm like, "Ugh." Being stuck in this little capsule called a child's body is so frustrating because it has all these limitations.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if that was also me just trying to make it a really good time while I was stuck in that little capsule until I grew up, but I really could not wait to stop being a kid.
That's interesting. Because you strike me as somebody who enjoyed being a kid,
Really?
I think, but maybe not. So maybe that's the question. Did you really enjoy being a kid? Like, did you have fun a lot?
I definitely had fun, but I felt like I had fun trying to do older things.
Oh,
Yeah.
anything leap out?
I mean, I do have well, I don't my parents have on recording, it's probably on an old VHS tape. If you are too young to know what that is, look it up. Recorded somewhere of me when I was probably like 8 or 9
Mhm.
saying that I just wanted to be older so I could get a job and work and drink coffee whenever I wanted, and I just wanted to have the freedom to do, like, mature things,
Mm.
like driving. I mean, but as, like, a kid, like, that's what I envisioned. I'm like, "I wanna have
Mhm.
freedom. I wanna be able to do things. I wanna" like, I can play with my toys, but what's that accomplishing? Nothing.
Nothing. That's so interesting. You're
Mhm.
in a trying to hit the accelerator, as it were,
Mhm.
to grow up.
Yeah.
Now, was it what you thought it was gonna be? Do you like, when you look back, do you look back at that and go, "Yep, I really wanted to be an adult, and here's all the good reasons why, and I'm so glad I am now."
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
No
I mean,
conflicts.
I will say there are times where I'm like, "Ugh, kids have it so great." Someone feeds you, takes care of you, and you just have to play and enjoy life and use your imagination. I mean, of course, that's a dream, but at the same time, I'm like, I remember doing that and had fun playing, playing
Mhm.
with my friends or whatever. But
Mhm.
I always wanted to just be doing something, building something, creating and finishing something. Like I loved the feeling of accomplishment.
Mhm. Gotcha.
So like I would tackle a list of chores so
Mhm.
much that I would do my brother's chores
Mhm.
sometimes because I wanted to make it perfect.
What I'm thinking of as you're talking about this, when I think back on that perfectionist side, it fits in with some other parts in that I think for me, some of it was, if I'm perfect, I can protect myself from difficult emotions.
Mm.
I can feel stronger. I felt weak as a kid. I was bullied a lot when I was really young. That kinda carried over, so I felt, like I wasn't strong enough. When I got really upset or really angry, I tended to cry, and I didn't like that either,
Mm.
right? Because the message I had for myself was that that was weak. So perfectionism was a way for me to protect myself
Hmm.
from those things, and I think that hits lots of different parts, if you will, for me. Uh, any of that for you with perfectionism? Did it, like, with difficult feelings, did you want to avoid difficult feelings at all with those? Or is
Mm.
it something that does it help you avoid difficult feelings now if you're trying to make things perfect, or does it do the opposite?
I don't think it necessarily does. I enjoy feeling my feelings if I'm angry. I'm angry.
That is certainly true.
And
I've seen you angry.
You have?
I have.
Really?
Not at me,
Oh, I was
fortunately.
like, what was I
Not
angry
yet.
about? I don't remember.
Day's not
Uh,
over yet, considering the last few days I've had. Jeez. Anyway, go ahead.
Now. I mean, I remember even as a kid, like my dad would always tell me like I need to be like slow to anger or whatever.
Oh
I
boy.
think I was
Yeah.
just a little feisty hothead as a child,
Mhm.
very snarky.
Right.
But now, like as an adult, I see the value in them, and I also understand that they're fleeting, and so I don't feel weak feeling any sort of particular emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I feel actually better about feeling them and addressing them and getting to know them because I'm
Yeah.
like, the more I know myself, the more I trust myself, the more confidence I have in myself. So maybe I don't have to be perfect. If I really know myself, then I have enough courage and,
Mm-hmm.
support within myself.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's an interesting answer. And I appreciate that. Cause one of the things I want to stress for listeners as well, there's nothing in anything we're talking about that is not normal. Right. We're not pathologizing anything here.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
There's not, I'm not suffering from any mental illness. And even if I were, we're not pathologizing that either. This is just something that I'm wrestling with. And the IFS piece is just another way of looking at some of these things. And, but it does hit those things. Like it gets me thinking of what are the things that perhaps I have carried over into my adult way of viewing myself, seeing myself, my understanding of my reality. And to what degree are some of those really good to hold on to, those past things, and what things are not really serving me? It's an ongoing process. And I think what's happening generally is I'm just digging into some new layers. It's
Mhm.
been a little while,
Mhm.
and I'm always willing to do that. Like, we've talked about on this show before. I've had to do this kind of work before. I'm not afraid of it. And so I'm not afraid of it now. I'm working through the chagrin of how it's coming about to the surface.
Chagrin.
I would have that's a good word, isn't it?
I don't even know what that word means.
Chagrin, just the angst,
Oh.
the regret, right? So that's a good one.
We're
Yeah,
learning
it
things
looks
from
great on the
professor over
page too.
here.
Write it down.
Oh,
It looks
on
great on
page.
the page. Yeah, it does. But nevertheless, that's sort of, I think, where I'm at with that. And it's funny because I kind of chuckled at myself the other day when I was looking at this. Like, look, if a client came to me, reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is what happened. This is what's going
Mhm.
on. Do you have time to talk about it?" First, the answer is yes. The second is, okay, what stories are coming up? Where did that come from? And they're going to know. And then, of course, we then talk about the very thing you said to me. It's one moment, right? There's more moments to follow, and what can you do? And of course, just this morning, I had a client reach out and say, "I really could use some help. Like, are you available
Mhm.
like anytime this morning?" And within, probably 20, 25 minutes, we're having a
Mhm.
conversation. And it was important, right, for that. And so it was kind of this thing like, okay, this is not out of the realm of my understanding. It's not out of the realm of my ability to do something about. Um, and it's also very normal, right? These types of things. And so that's why I sort of found that interesting. So when we come back from break, Ashley, we will of
Mhm.
course do our weekly segment.
2 minutes of terror.
2 minutes of terror this week, even though this entire episode for me feels like a 2 minutes of terror, or in this case, 42 minutes of terror so far. But nevertheless, we'll do that. And we'll talk about a few other things related to this subject and the IFS stuff about parts that we all have. So come on back in just a minute.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diaspora, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diaspora offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests on the Diaspora Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Diabetes is on the rise, putting healthy vision at risk. Diabetes-related eye disease is the leading cause of blindness in adults 20 to 74. It's appearing earlier with greater frequency in younger people. Try to prevent vision loss from diabetes by getting dilated eye exams, regular health checkups to monitor blood glucose levels, and follow a diabetes treatment program as prescribed. Learn more at preventblindness.org/diabetes. A public service message from Prevent Blindness, United Healthcare Vision, and this station.
Talk radio with a purpose. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Staying Power. JD here with Ashley.
Hello.
And whether you're listening or watching the live stream on our new YouTube channel, we're really happy to have you here. And if you want access to all those things, you can get this as a podcast wherever you get your podcast. Check the show notes. All the good stuff's in there, right? And more to come.
There's so much of us going around.
So much
so
of us.
excited.
For better or for worse. So, well, that's just kind of the week I'm having. I need to stop bashing myself a little bit here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
You should.
I'm using humor to deflect at this moment.
Is that helping?
No.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Hopefully it's making good content, but no, it's not. It's not
You know what,
helping me.
JD? I really appreciate you being so honest.
Mm.
We're always honest in our episodes, but because that's where we build our content from. But
Mhm.
you have been really raw and honest on this show so far, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just acknowledge that it's not easy.
It
It's
is
one thing
not.
when you're just chatting with your friend, but when you're sharing this publicly and openly about this
Mhm.
in real time, that's a really big deal.
Thank you for that. That helps a lot. Means a lot. It's one of those connective pieces that you and I fortunately share, and that helps. The other reason I thought talking about it, all jokes aside about good content, this is real stuff, and we do this show because we're helping real people go through real things, and we also are real people going through real things.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be really easy for me to always want to show up with an answer, right? Goes back to my teaching days.
Mhm.
I always wanted to have an answer. And as the same friend that I'm working through things with has pointed out rightly before, I like to be right.
You
And
do?
I do. I
Okay.
do. And it's a reminder of my need to learn how to listen as much as I'm able to say what I feel. I'm able
Mhm.
to find that. I'm able to articulate that. But I'm still working on that, continuing that active listening that is allowing somebody else's reality and understanding of things to, not for me to assess and decide whether or not it's correct or not. And I do it unconsciously when I do it, but to see that as valid and to see that as important and that it can be that way, right?
Mhm.
Whether I agree with it or not. So I want to share those things. And it is intimidating on some level, but it's also liberating at the same time. Right. So one of the things that IFS talks about is instead of being glued to the parts, or responding to those, you start learning as you develop communication with those parts, what your
Mhm.
actual self is, a grown self.
Mhm.
Right now in this moment, I feel like I'm more connected to that, and some of that is because it kind of reminded me of that, what you just said. It's like, oh yeah, okay. It isn't easy. And at the same time, it's worth it because this is what we do, right? And we all go through it. So I wouldn't ever want any client that we have or any listener to think that we suddenly have the answer for everything every time we
Right.
come on here.
Right.
Because we don't.
No.
And that's not what we need right now. We have too many people in the world telling us what we should think and what we shouldn't think.
Mhm.
We don't spend enough time figuring out what it is that we actually know deep down.
That's a really valid point.
Yeah, thanks. All right. So before we forget, because there's a distinct chance we will, let's go ahead and do this week's weekly segment where Ashley and I each take 2 minutes to talk about something during the week that, in this case, this week, produced some terror in some way, shape, or form. It's what we call 2 minutes of terror. Here we go. All right.
You probably thought you already shared because
No kidding.
you've been
I know.
47
But I
minutes
actually
in.
have something different. for this,
Oh,
so yeah. So go
Goodness
ahead.
sakes, you
Yeah.
poor child.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Related, but different.
All right. Mine is actually, it's a mix. It's a good thing, but it is still a little bit terrorizing. So as of late, in my business world portion of myself, in my occupation, we've had some changes, management, people, software, so on and so forth. And thankfully, the addition of all these things and changes has produced more availability for me to have free time to actually work on some things.
Mm.
Meaning I am much less stressed because my workload has dropped because I've been able to disperse this out and delegate this to some other people. And we have systems in place that are making this more automated. So all of a sudden, I get to like the end of the day or end of the week, and I am feeling the natural, like, what am I missing? I should be doing something. I'm supposed to be like overwhelmed and just under an avalanche of work right now. And I look and I'm like, whoa, I've gotten so much done. My pile is much smaller. And it's weird. Why are you looking at me
I'm
like that?
wondering why that's terror.
Because it's odd. I've never felt something like this before where I literally can feel the anxiousness, the stress response coming up.
Oh, I see.
I feel it. And I'm like, there's nothing causing this. So
Hmm.
it's almost like I have trained myself to, when I get to the end of a day or I get to the end of the work week, that I should be feeling this way. And it's very strange. I only had this realization like a week or two ago,
Hmm.
where it was ended up being a week where I got through most of my stuff that I needed to do, like the vital things. And I'm like, I'm proud of myself. I've accomplished so much. And then I'm feeling like super stressed and anxious and
Mhm.
like all these things. There should be more I should be doing and all this. And I'm like, why am I feeling like this? I did
Mhm.
so great. And then I was like, was it because it wasn't perfect?
Mhm.
But it was kind of like a moment that I'm like, now I feel like I have to kind of retrain myself. Be like, Ashley, you did well today. Good job.
Mhm.
And let it rest at that.
Yep.
But I actually now have to figure out how to deal with these uninspired stress responses that are just there, that I'm like, why are you here?
Sounds like a lot of restlessness that you're not sure. Like, is that how it feels? Is like restlessness?
Kind of.
Okay.
It's just, or I would call it guilt,
Oh,
actually.
guilt.
I'm feeling guilt
like there
because
should
all of
be
a
more?
sudden I am not putting in so many extra hours of work. And I'm like, oh,
It should.
I should be doing this because
Uh-huh.
that was my standard.
There it
And
is.
now I'm not. And I'm like, am I? Am I not doing something right here? And then I'm like, no, this is how it was supposed to be all along.
I love it.
Anyways, working through it.
Good
so it's
realization.
not terror like what your situation has been, but
uncomfortable.
it's yes. And it was weird that it's uncomfortable.
Right.
I'm like, I should be celebrating. And yet I'm feeling stressed about not feeling stressed.
Right. Right.
So there's
All right.
that.
Well, I look forward
what
to
do you
seeing how
got?
that works out.
Oh.
Well, mine is related to what I've been talking about. And I want to ratchet back really quickly. We're joking about this being 48 minutes of terror for me the entire time. It's uncomfortable. It's not terror, what I'm talking about. It's also worth every damn minute of it, right? I am more than willing to dive into this for my sake, for the sake of my friendship with this person. I'm willing to do all of that, right?
Mhm.
And I'm willing to listen to friends who tell me things that are tough to hear sometimes, right? And I've shared a few of those today, right? And you've shared a few things that have been tough with me before. That's all worth it, right? So just because it's difficult doesn't mean I'm not willing to go after it. And that's what kind of what we're talking about here. That's the staying power that we're talking about, that kind of resilience. For me, what's related to it is kind of in one of these conversations I was having with my friend over the weekend. One of the side issues that was related that came up was this question of, do I really trust myself in what I'm doing in my broader life and what I'm doing in my broader purpose? And it was an uncomfortable thing to have to assess. And I do think my friend was onto something, that there are elements about myself that I am not trusting in putting myself forward. I think it's one of the reasons why I went so sideways last Friday on some of the things that were difficult, because some things that I was telling myself needed to happen or should happen in order for me to be all right, when they didn't happen, I just went boom. Rather than trusting, okay, that's not what this is about. I just need to make a pivot and an adjustment, which I've done before, right? When things haven't worked out for me. I have some experience with that. But so this question, the terror part, or the discomfort, uncomfortable part for my 2 minutes, is about this notion of teasing out what it is about myself that I'm not trusting. And how is that manifesting in my life? How do I connect with that more effectively? And what have been the costs of it, so that I can take an assessment of those and move away from them? And not just in the conversation I'm having with my friend, but just in general. And yesterday, one of the reasons why I kind of had this whipsaw effect of kind of feeling really kind of euphoric and positive, right? What she called, kind of sounded manic, right? Was I kind of leaned into some of that stuff yesterday on this trust question, and some positives came out of it. And all of a sudden I was like, Oh, I've got a better sense of that. But, my emotions were really carried away yesterday with that, from that side of things. And so that's a difficult thing, right? I want to be able to trust myself and know that I'm acting on, from that space. So that's the difficult part. So there we go.
All right.
How about that?
Thanks for sharing.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. In the last few minutes, I think one thing that might be good for us to talk about is, while we are talking about a therapeutic model, IFS, that is more and more people are using, and you see more and more about it. It's been on some of the biggest podcasts out there lately.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have a link to one of those in our show notes, where you can hear from Dr. Richard Schwartz himself about how this works. And actually, there's a mini session that he runs in that with the show host that you can listen to, so you can kind of hear for yourself how this goes. We are not practitioners, nor are we therapists, right? So there's an couple important points there to be made, right?
Right. I mean, with that kind of therapy and with therapists in general, they really tackle the past,
Mhm.
because a lot of what's happening in modern day is rooted in the past when we
Mhm.
were younger. And they are obviously licensed and knowledgeable and experienced to help people dig through those, uncover it, and work through that.
Mhm.
Now, what we do with coaching is very present day moving forward. So ours is not, we don't dive into like the past and whatnot, but we can take things that are happening presently or whatever you're dealing with presently and figure out, what do we do moving forward with it?
Sure.
What is the goodness that you can find in this, and how can you make this better?
Mhm.
What are the stories that are coming up for yourself, and is that legitimate? Is that something you should be carrying with you?
Right. Or what's that doing now when the story
Mhm.
comes up? I mean, because we have people share that with us, like they have an awareness that some
Right.
response comes from childhood, and go, okay, well then we go to, okay, well, when this happens in the now, like, or when that came up in this thing you're talking about,
Mhm.
where do you go with that?
Right.
What do you do with that? So we stay there. So we do have the experience quite a bit with our clients of recognizing when there are what we think are areas that we don't have expertise in, which are many, and that they need therapeutic work. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah. So you've referred,
Mhm.
you've referred people.
I
I've
think
referred people.
therapy's great.
It is.
Honestly, I think people should do therapy and our coaching.
I think so too. And in, the interest of full disclosure here in the last few minutes, this whole situation, I've been doing therapy for once a month for about a year, but in retrospect, it hasn't been digging into where I needed to dig. That's probably one reason I was doing it once a month. It was almost like kind of just checking in on it, I guess, a little bit. And I don't talk about it very much with people, right? And I'm recognizing now that I think I probably need to dig in a little deeper. And so I'm in the process of identifying exactly what I want to
Letting
do.
your therapist know we're going deeper.
Well, probably finding one that maybe works in one of these modalities that I haven't done
Sure.
yet, right?
Yeah.
Maybe IFS or something like that. I'm not sure. I have some people that I want to ask about that, and I've already reached out to a couple of them to get their opinions. Both are therapists, and my friend that I've been working through this challenge with is also one, and I'd like her opinion at some point when all of that is once we reach a repair in all of this. But it is an important part, and it's not for times where you feel like you're broken and lost. It can be for the things that you really want to work through,
Mhm.
right? So, and I recognize it's not necessarily for everybody. And one of the cool things about IFS is it is designed in some ways for people to be able to have these conversations and facilitate them with their parts themselves. And I know that is appealing to a number of people who might
Sure.
think that therapy doesn't work for them.
Right.
Right. And it might not work for them. Right. So, all right. So we wanted to make that clear at the end. And it's certainly not anything that we've talked about here today should be construed as medical advice or therapeutic advice, anything like that. This was more a conversation about how this kind of comes up for us in real time. So Ashley, thank you for sitting so well with all of that, not just now, but particularly
Sure.
when I was upside down a few days ago. Appreciate that. I appreciate your friendship, appreciate what we get to do in all of this. And we certainly appreciate all of our listeners and viewers
That's right.
for tuning into this episode of Staying Power. Remember, if you missed any of this, you can get Staying Power as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also see a replay of this as well as edited versions of it coming up soon on our YouTube channel. There'll also be more content there. We also have a Patreon site where you can support our larger work. And in the show notes, both on our YouTube channel as well as wherever you get your podcasts. You can find all the connections to our social media, our email, and all the ways that you can reach out to Ashley and myself, either with comments about the show, if you're looking for coaching, if you're looking for support, all of those things. We would love to hear from you. And be sure to check out also, while you're listening to this, our new show, Diaspora, under the Staying Power banner. Our friend Adi Mehta is doing a podcast sharing stories of people from the Indian subcontinent who are living in the States and in Canada. It's an absolutely fascinating show. It's a great job. We're so proud to be supporters of it. And congratulations to Addie, because that just dropped today.
It did.
So, all right. So Diaspora, check that out. It's got 2 A's at the end, by the way. So that's the show that you'll know. Until next time, I am JD.
I'm Ashley.
We will see you soon.
Bye.